I'm your African history teacher, Professor Hicks, and welcome back for another session, another broadcast. All right, and we're going to dive right into it. No political commentary today. I think it's all self explained what's going on throughout the country. So we're going to dive right back into this Ishango Bone and African women genius. So yesterday we finished up talking about the river valleys and the natural areas where civilization occurred. As just as a reference, we talked about Egypt. We talked about which is the Nile Valley, and the longest river in the world is the Nile River. You should know that, 4,100 feet long. And we talked about Mesopotamia, and we're familiar with that today because there's a lot of fighting going on over in that area now, present day Iraq, and that is Mesopotamia. Excuse me while I'm just pulling out some notes and stuff. And also we talked about the Indus in India, the Indus River, the Indus Valley. The Indus Valley is supported by the Indus River. And finally, China, the Hunghe, or better known as the Yellow River to most Americans. To most historians, we know it as Hunghe. And these river valleys were the places where most of civilization started at. Now, you heard I said most of civilization started. I didn't mention Europe. Europe is not a part of this. So for those who don't know their history, and many of our white brothers and sisters don't know their own history as well as we don't, we know that that's not where life began. That has been purported through historians over the centuries. No. Black people were everywhere. We began all civilizations. We were in Iraq first. We were in Japan first. We were in China first. We were in Egypt. And I know if you're perusing the social content on social media, you've seen images of black Japanese, black Chinese. You've seen images of people in the Philippines who were first originally black. All on the planet, throughout the entire planet. That's why you have these brothers talking about America being Africa. Yes, but it's not where we came from. Yes, Africans were here first. They were in America first before what we call the dime store, the nickel store, Indians who claimed to be here first. No, those are Mongolians who came and interacted and who had intercourse with the Africans that were here, eventually numerically overcoming them and eventually becoming what we call today the Native Americans. That's why in certain parts of this country, you look at images, you see black Native Americans, and you now see them coming back, requesting their lands and their names and their history, which was taken from them by the European Eurocentrics and many of the Native Americans who participated along with the Euros and took their history. So when we talk about the origins of civilization and we talk about the Yellow River and then this and the Nile, these are places that provided a surplus of agriculture that allowed human beings to begin to develop. These places provided agriculture because their rivers overflowed and they were able to grow crops. The flooding provided fertile land for these people to grow these crops. And of course, the soil was nutrient rich, along with some of their own technologies to enhance the soil to better develop crops. These river valleys also were known to have small clans of people. Yes, very small clans of people originally. And as these clans began to develop and create societies, we began to get people who were in charge, who controlled these societies. And these people were in the form of the female African woman. She created the first family unit and she organized the family structure. Now, that takes us back to the Ishango bone that we are looking at right now. I have been looking at this image for quite some time, and I had to study it, and that's why I left it up for you to study, because in this image you find lunar records, meaning the sun, the records of the moon moving through its elliptical phases, You find recording of menstrual cycles, of women counting their menstrual cycles or recording them, I should say. And then finally, you have another group of marks on this that gives us a calendar. A calendar. So these African women did template for all deities and gods, creating through this Ishango bone records of history, time, and space. This is the genius of the African woman. Moreover, we like to know, questions always are important for investigation. So we start this off with a question: what is the relationship between the Ashango bone and the African woman? Well, let's find out what that is. The relationship between the Ashango bone and the African woman is not direct in a biographical sense, but a deeply symbolic, cultural, and anthropological. It sits at the intersection of early mathematics, timekeeping, fertility, and the woman's embodiment of knowledge. Yes, African woman created timekeeping, record keeping, and of course their fertility was known. It was what was postulated in order to understand the concept of a deity and God. So the Ashango bone and the menstrual knowledge, Ashango bone and menstrual knowledge were the core link here. One of the strongest interpretations advanced notably by ethnomathematicians and African-centered scholars like me is that the Ashango bone functioned as a menstrual or lunar tracking tool. So this bone, which is being etched on by a piece of itself, is being marked and keeping the first record of the menstrual cycle and the lunar cycle. The bone dates back to 25 or 20,000 years ago, actually 30, and it contains group notches arranged in pattern sequences. Several of these sequences align with the lunar cycle, 29 to 30 days. Doubling patterns based on 2. So another portion of this bone is a multiple of 2. Now, I don't have the time to go to each one, but if you just quickly take a glance and take a moment and breathe and take this image, you can see. And I believe will be the bottom row of C. It also contains prime numbers, and prime numbers are the uneven numbers, or the numbers you can't divide by themselves, and that is also located on row B at the top. Why this matters to women? In many African societies, ancient and recent, women were the primary keepers of reproductive time. Menstrual cycles were tracked in relation to fertility, pregnancy, ritual purity, and agricultural timing. Now, just to bring a little simplicity to that, the fertility, of course, has to do with production, pregnancy spacing, understanding when you're pregnant and the time in between you might give birth, ritual purity, where there were rituals created that would symbolically demonstrate to someone the fertility, the reproduction of women as related to plants and animals doing the same thing, reproducing in their own particular ways. All right. And of course, agricultural timing should be pretty simple. We're talking about when we plant something, when we reap and sow it, and we then eat it eventually. All right, that is the timing, and timing is important in agricultural cultures because we need to know when the rain is going to come. If we're going to know when the rain is going to come, we got to know that we got to plant before that. So we have to keep track of the time of the seasons and be able to recognize those seasons as they come upon us. The African woman as the first mathematician. Yes, folks, African women created math, created observation. Long before formal numerals, counting arose from cycles, not commerce. Cycles, things that go around, not commerce. Cycles of the moon, for example. Cycles of the blood, of birth, and of seasons. Yes, a menstrual period when a woman bled, that blood was held sacred. African women's blood was a sacred of entity that was used sometimes in agriculture. African women, through menstruation and childbirth, had the most consistent internal biological clock available to early humans. We know you didn't have your watch on then. So, what other type of way would you be able to record childbirth, menstruations? You had to use the woman. She used her menstrual cycle to determine many things besides her menstruation period. The Ashango bone likely encodes counting by observation. Another discovery by the black woman, observation, which is the key to all scientific ramifications. Pattern recognition, when a plant grows the same place at the same time of the year. These mathematical acts rooted in female biology and social responsibility. Now, that social responsibility is how we begin to develop and formulate the functioning family. And I say functioning because in a functional family, everybody has a role. It's not an abstract thing going on. It is a role-dominated family unit. Across Central and East Africa, menstruation was often sacred. And we just spoke about that. Not taboo. Well, what do you mean by that, Professor Hicks? In American society, many women are afraid to even mention their menstruation period to anybody because it's looked upon as something bad. Yes, this is the psychopathy of European Western thinking, that a menstruation period is something bad instead of something that is wonderful, that is a part of the human functioning, that is a part of God. But no, not here in America. That's something different. So menstruation in East Africa and Central Africa and the continent as a whole was something looked at as sacred. Women's blood was associated with creation, folks, renewal, and cosmic order. What do you mean by that, Professor Hicks? There is an order in the universe, folks. As above, so below. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you wash up. Cosmic order, the sun rises, the stars go away, and we know that's going to happen every time we exist, or how long we do, right? That's order. That's cosmic order. The bone tool used to mark such cycles would not be a casual, it would be a ritual knowledge. So understanding the cycles and causations of the cycles was a ritual knowledge. You had to know this. And some of what we might call in our day and time, the peasants or the average people knew these things as well. Maybe not as verbatim as a woman who's studying this, but they knew it. This aligns with the broader African traditions where women were calendrical authorities, meaning they were the ones who created and made the calendars. Female elders determined ritual timing. Cosmology followed womb logic, meaning that as above, so below. So how a woman womb works was looked upon at the plants and how they work, how other animals worked, and how their reproductive process worked. Then they looked up at the skies and they saw how the skies and the stars and the cosmic order worked similarly. Modern narratives often attribute early math to Mesopotamia and Greece, centered male scribes and merchants, dismissed embodied or oral knowledge. So what we're saying there is that as the patriarchy, meaning man-dominated societies came, they began to steal what they could not understand. And they took the answers as well. They began to dismiss oral knowledge as primitive. I'm sure you've heard this before, where if it's not in a book, it doesn't mean anything. They began to reframe the meaning of the Ishango bone. All right. And in just a few sentences, I kind of summarize this here. The Ashango bone represents an early African mathematical system likely rooted in women's tracking of lunar and menstrual cycles, making African women central, not peripheral, as they are placed today, to the origins of mathematics and scientific timekeeping. All right. So, and we're going to conclude this. What are the female deities and cosmology? What are these African women? How did they become deities? And as it relates to cosmology, because as we know, Isis is a deity. All right, we know that she was the mother, but we also know that she was worshipped like a god, not only by Africans, but by the Greeks and Romans as well. So below is a cosmological map. I'm going to show you how female deities across Africa embody order, time, fertility, and knowledge. Ma'at. I showed you a picture of Ma'at the other day. And this is Ma'at. This is Ma'at. This is a picture of Ma'at. Ma'at is not merely, excuse me, Ma'at is not merely a moral concept. She is the universe functioning correctly. She governs the cosmic order, the measurement of time, justice. That's why you see her holding the scales with the feather. The feather is the means by which she judges the heart. If the heart outweighs the feather, it's not a good thing. Her symbol is the feather, is a unit of balance. Excuse me. Pharaohs upheld Ma'at the way scientists uphold laws. Cosmological role. Here's the role, the cosmological role of the African woman as relates to Ma'at, her symbol. Ma'at represents equilibrium, mathematics, the idea that the cosmos can be measured, weighed, and kept in balance. Female significance. Truth is not imposed like we do in Western society. For the African woman, truth, or the female significance of truth, is not imposed by force, but maintained like the womb, maintains life through balance, timing, and care. We have a truth problem in this country now with a president who does nothing, but anytime he speaks, he lies. And this is perpetuated throughout our society, not just by the president, but by European Western culture. The language of Western culture is the language of lies. It does not tell the truth ever. As we mentioned yesterday's broadcast, that words in American, I should say in the Western world, but mostly in the American, have different meanings. One word could have 3 different meanings. That's not truth. That's just another means to get out of a lie. Isis, we mentioned Isis. She was knowledge, resurrection, and science. Isis is the keeper of divine knowledge. Isis was a symbolic representation of the African woman. She reassembles Osiris' anatomical knowledge. If you know the story of Osiris, and he was killed by Set, and they dismembered him in different places and threw him all over Egypt. Well, this is what she came to do, to reassemble us. To reassemble us. That was her job. She uses spoken words, vibrational science. You know, the Indians take credit for this because they got the chakras and this, but they deserve credit for something that they have developed. But it all originated with the African woman, using sound vibrations for science. Restores fertility to the dead. That's when she got Osiris together. She got all of his parts together and restored him to life. Cosmological role. Isis represents applied science, knowledge that heals and restores and regenerates. Connection to woman. Her magic is not spectacle. not something you perform for people. It's a procedural knowledge passed on orally, like a midwife. My aunt was a midwife. Hathor, cycles, stars, and times. And we're going to conclude with this. Hathor, the great Hathor, is linked to the Milky Way, the heliacal rising of Sirius, to fertility and joy. Cosmological Roshi governs the cyclical time, not linear time as we see it here in Western society. And this time is tied to astronomy, agriculture, and birth. And with that, folks, we're going to complete our second broadcast on this today, and I will join you again. I hopefully by Monday, I'm sure. If not, maybe I can have a surprise broadcast tomorrow. And with that said, be safe, be well, be kind to your folk, and ashe.